One of the biggest advantages in working in the insurance industry is that there are opportunities all around us. Every single community, every town, every state has unique insurance needs. And as insurance professionals, part of our job is recognizing what is happening in your local market and understanding where those opportunities exist. For example, if you live in an agricultural area, farm insurance may be a major part of your community. But if you're in a rapidly growing city, you may see commercial opportunities or as new businesses open. And so it's really important that we understand the opportunities in our community and ask ourselves and our clients what risks are people facing and how can we help you protect them. And so it's really important to understand your local market and stop looking for customers and start recognizing opportunities to round out accounts. Every single policy that we have to offer, we need to make people aware of it so that they can buy it. And so clients often assume that one policy will cover every single thing and they're protected. Working in insurance, I used to hate on the claim side when a client would tell me, my agent told me I have bumper to bumper coverage. And that means everything is covered. And it's really important to understand that, just because somebody only asked for an auto policy, they may have a need for an umbrella policy. Or a restaurant owner may not know that they're at risk for cybersecurity attacks. Our job is to help identify those gaps and educate our clients on their options. We also can't put all of our eggs into one basket. And so think about some of the exposures that have become really common over the last couple of years. I had a friend who actually rented a stranger's pool for her husband's birthday party. People are operating businesses out of their homes. Today, we have self-driving vehicles that are running red lights in Dallas. People are riding e-bikes, flying drones, participating in the gig economy. 20 years ago, these exposures didn't exist, and they weren't common enough to create widespread insurance concerns. And so it's really important to remember that the insurance industry is constantly evolving and it's adapting to new risks, and we also have to adapt along with it. We can't become experts in just one thing and assume that that'll be enough to keep our agency afloat. And so it's also important to remember that insurance should grow with its clients, right? Clients' needs are constantly evolving and we need to be prepared to help them and guide them and educate them so that they can make good decisions and remain relevant throughout their journey, no matter what stage of life they're in. And so diversification, it's not just selling different products. It's about future-proofing your knowledge, your agency, and your ability to help clients no matter what their risks they're facing. And so our quote for this topic is to strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value by Albert Einstein. In insurance, being valuable often means being a jack of all trades. I've heard so many people say before, I'm just a CSR, or I'm just a receptionist, or I'm not licensed, but that doesn't mean that you can't be valuable to your agency and to your clients. You don't have to be the world's leading expert in every single policy type, but you should have enough knowledge to identify these opportunities and risks and point clients in the right direction. And, more well-rounded your knowledge becomes, the more valuable you become to your agency. You stop being somebody who's just here to take payments or to sell policies and somebody who's guiding clients to making informed decisions. And so, what is diversification? And it's one of the keys to building a resilient insurance agency. And it's because markets change, carrier appetites change, economic conditions change. What works today may not work 5 years from now. And so by developing a really broad understanding of different products and exposures, we put ourselves into a better decision or position to actually adapt to the changes that are occurring. And more importantly, we are also here to serve our clients as their needs evolve as well. So a client, they may come to us with an auto insurance concern, but over time, they may actually buy a home or start a business, right? And so it's really important to remember that even if you're working in personal lines as an account manager, that doesn't mean that your knowledge in commercial is not your circus or not your monkeys. You can still talk about it. You can still ask questions and connect them with somebody who's licensed on the commercial side. And so agencies that thrive long-term aren't necessarily the ones that just have the most policies. They're the ones that are consistently providing value and building connections with their clients to round out those accounts, especially to have clients who have more than just one policy. So depending on your agency's location, you may have specific risks that are more common than agencies in other states. It's important to be aware of those hazards that are out there, right? So in California, they have a really high risk for earthquakes. So this is something that we need to make our clients aware about when they purchase a home. Many people think flood insurance, they usually think of Florida or hurricanes or coastal communities. But one of the biggest mistakes that we can make is assuming that a risk only exists in one area. Now, a couple of years ago here in Texas, we had some devastating floods that made national headlines about Camp Mystic and the Texas Hill Country. Over 13,000 policies outside of the FEMA designated flood zones were affected. And the Houston Chronicle actually reported that less than 150 out of 3,000 homes were actually insured. In this specific flood, it caused $1.1 billion of damage and over 140 people died. So this catastrophe reminded us that, catastrophic flooding, it can happen really far away from the coast. Water doesn't necessarily care about state lines, right? And so just because it's not common in our area doesn't mean that we're not going to take the time to educate people and be like, hey, this is something that you should know about and here's why it's important. We also have hail and wind coverage for those Midwest and Texas areas where it's more common. When we work in sales, sometimes we get very transactional. We think everybody just needs home and auto. We're going to put them in this specific box. However, depending on your client, they're going to have different needs. Vacation homes need specific policies. If you're gone for a majority of the year, a regular standard homeowner's policy, you may not be eligible for. If you have a claim, it may not be covered. And so it's really important to have the perspective that we're here to also educate them about things they may not know and expand our book of business. And one of the biggest mistakes that we can make is seeing a client as a single policy and not a person. Somebody who calls for auto insurance, they may also own a home, a boat, or they need an umbrella policy. And they may have policies with other agents. They may have other businesses, or maybe they just got married. We need to take the time to see the full picture so that we can identify those opportunities. And if we're not collecting that information, then we don't have the opportunity to solve those problems. Now, one of the best things that you can do to set both you and your agency up for success is know your book of business. Before we can actually effectively educate clients, you need to understand who they are and what matters to them. And so when you think about your agency, who are your most common clients? Are you primarily serving young families, buying the homes for the first time, or retirees or snowbirds or small business owners who are trying to grow their companies? Every community has its own specific set of risks, and it's really important that we actually ask and identify and share, hey, if you live in Minnesota, maybe we should talk about what happens in the winter if your pipes freeze. Or, if you're in the Midwest, we've got the hail concerns. And then also California, we've got earthquakes. But the really important part here is understanding that regional risks aren't just putting people into boxes. Just because something's not common doesn't mean that we can't take the time to educate them. Hey, there is a possibility that we could have a flood in this area. I thought you'd want to know that flood insurance is not covered by your standard homeowner's policy. And so we do have to ask ourselves questions. And my recommendation is if you're new to your agency, reach out to somebody who's worked there for a while and just ask them, hey, what type of policies are we aiming to insure? What type of risks are really popular in this area? And then we want to be intentional when we talk to people who are calling in and inquiring about insurance so that we can identify some opportunities that we have. So our first Insurance 101 philosophy is to adopt the investigator mindset. Diversification, it starts with curiosity and our ability to get to know our clients. And so one way that we can do that is we want to make sure that we're not just taking requests at face value. If a client says, I need auto insurance, an investigator would ask and say, tell me more about the vehicle, how it's used, how many drivers you have. If a client says, I need home insurance, we want to know about the home, the property, what type of risks they may have, rental exposures, and the recent updates you've done. And so great agents, they're not just collecting the information that's provided. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper because our clients don't always know what details are important. And sometimes they don't even realize what risks are out there. And that's why it's okay to answer a question with a question. You're not being difficult. You're just gathering facts. And I think a lot of times we need to be careful how we structure that question, and we need to ask open-ended questions. An open-ended question is a question that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. The more information that your client provides and the more they talk about their situation or themselves, the more we get to find out. We want to look beyond the initial request and try to understand what's the story behind this, right? What exposures exist? What are you trying to protect? What aren't you telling us because they don't know that it's relevant? And so the investigator in mindset, it helps us move from people who are just here to process payments to people who are here to educate, protect, and serve our clients. In commercial insurance, it's very common for agencies to develop a niche. And a niche is simply a specialized area of expertise. Maybe your agency focuses on contractors, restaurants, trucking companies, whatever it may be. But we do have a real world example of an agency we worked with here at APP that their niche was taxi companies. And so this agency, they built a really strong reputation in the taxi industry in their area. That agency understood the risks, they knew the coverages, they built up carrier relationships and became a trusted expert in insurance for the taxi community. And as a result, they kind of cornered the market because everybody who lived in that city and drove taxis, they knew this agent and they would refer other people who were getting into the industry directly to him. But the market changed. Rideshare companies became really popular. You have Uber, you have Lyft, and now people aren't using taxis as much as they used to. And a lot of those businesses, unfortunately, had to close. And this actually put the agent's book of business at risk. There's fewer taxi fleets to insure, which meant fewer opportunities in that niche that they had built their commercial sales model around. And this agency, they did not resist or resent the change that came. They just chose to evolve and be nimble. They expanded into their rideshare and delivery coverage, and that way they were able to identify new exposures and continue to serve their community. And I think working in an agency that has a specific niche, it's not a bad thing because you're actually able to be seen as the industry expert, but we also need to remember that we have to be flexible. We cannot put all of our eggs in the same basket. And when there is a change, we can't resist it. We have to let go of the mentality of we've always done it this way. We have to want to be able to stay relevant and be nimble with whatever challenges do come with the industry. So when people hear the term cross-selling, sometimes it makes them feel a little icky. They think of it as like pushing products or trying to sell things that clients don't need. And that's not the way that we want to think about it. We want to think of cross-selling as technically cross-educating, right? And most clients, they call in and they're like, hey, I have this policy in mind. I need an auto policy because it's a legal requirement for me to drive in my state. Maybe I want homeowners insurance because my mortgagee clause says I absolutely have to, right? And that's a problem that cross-selling solves or fixes. And, we often only know part of the problem or part of the situation. And so if they're just calling in, they may mention that they bought a home. Another may say, hey, I need homeowners insurance and I'm nervous because I'm planning a wedding and I just bought this really expensive engagement ring. And our responsibility is to look beyond their immediate request and identify these opportunities to offer other products. That person who wants homeowners insurance, but they just bought a $4,000 ring, they may need a specific policy to cover that jewelry, right? Because now you have something new and you may not be thinking about, well, what happens if a stone falls out of my ring or if I lose it? That may not be something that comes to the forefront of their mind when they're talking to you on the phone. It's really important to remember you don't want to just throw random things out there. We do want to tailor the insurance that we're offering to something that actually protects something that your client is truly passionate about, right? Sometimes they'll understand the value and be like, yes, I can absolutely benefit from this. And sometimes they'll say no, but the way that I like to look at it is if they say no, that just means not right now or maybe later. And if we identify a potential risk or a coverage gap, we should educate the client. They can't make an informed decision about protection if they don't know that that option exists. So how do I feel confident bringing up other policies when my client just called me and asking for one, right? And that's because we just need to have a really strong understanding of what policies are out there. The more knowledge you have, the easier these conversations become. In our Insurance 101 course, you may want to just watch the personal lines auto section because that's what you specifically handle. But I strongly encourage you to check out the other sections as well. Even if you're not selling and you're just servicing policies, we need to know enough to be dangerous and bring it up to our clients as a cross-selling option so that we can actually transfer them to somebody who can assist them with binding that coverage. We need to have a strong understanding of how different policies work so that we do feel comfortable bringing them up. Every single opportunity or moment that we have to actually talk with a client, we learn more about that client situation. And even if you're not licensed, they may talk to you the most because, hey, I'm calling in to make a payment, but that doesn't mean that if they tell you I have a risk, I have a need, and you know of an insurance policy that exists that can help them, we do need to speak on it. We do need to circle back to it. We can document it. We owe that much to our clients. We need to have the thought process of if we're good enough for one policy, we're good enough for all of them. If a client trusts us to insure their vehicle, why wouldn't they trust us enough to discuss their home or renter's policy, a life insurance policy, and umbrella coverages, or business exposures that they may have? And if they have those policies with another agent, we need to feel comfortable asking, do you have any policies with other agents? Because I promise you, if you're not asking, the other agent is. And consolidating those accounts, it gives us the opportunity to identify discounts. It makes life easier for the insured. And that in and of itself isn't just cross-selling, it's excellent customer service. And so our responsibility is to educate clients and make sure that they're aware that they have options. It creates strong client relationships. They want to stay with your agency because they understand how helpful you are. And they'll see you as more than a person that they just talk to whenever they want to pay a bill. So most agents or clients will not call you and just say, I'm interested in an umbrella policy. I need a life insurance policy, because that's not how people who don't work in insurance think, right? Instead, they'll casually mention something happening in their life. Maybe they'll say, I'm moving next week. To them, that's just a life event. To us, that's potentially a homeowner's, a renter's, an auto, an umbrella, or even a life insurance conversation. They may mention that we just had a baby. That is more than just a family milestone. That's a signal that their financial responsibilities have changed, and maybe it's time to talk about a life policy. And so this is where the investigator mindset applies. Great agents listen for opportunities hidden in those everyday conversations, and we have to pay attention to what our clients are telling us so that we can connect those life events to potential risks. So the more you learn about insurance, the more these clues will actually start jumping out to you, and you'll get to a point where your brain immediately identifies the risk and knows the insurance solution. So it is time for our Insurance Nerd recap, and we have our mascot here to remind us that prospects don't work in insurance, or some of them don't. So, they don't know what to ask for. And it's important to remember that diversifying your book of business protects your agency, and it provides better coverage and financial protection for our clients. They don't know what to ask for, so we have to ask open-ended questions and listen for clues. Channel your inner insurance investigator and educate clients on the policies that could benefit their specific situation. Clients tell us about our lives, and it is our job to connect those changes to their insurance needs.